WATD FM Marshfield, WBMS Brockton. Welcome back to Monday Night Talk. Don't just listen, say something. Call 781-837-4900. We now return to Kevin Tocci and Monday Night Talk.
Welcome back to Monday Night Talk here on 95.9 WATD. And for the next 1 hour, we are going to talk about retirement. It's the one thing that I think a lot of us, it sneaks up on us because you work, and before you know it, you're into an age group. And you say, if I had done this sooner. We have brought in a couple of experts. First, I want to say is that joining us right now is Paula Harris with Cornerstone Investment. This was something that Paula had pitched to me a couple of weeks ago and said, hey, what do you think if we did, normally we do a half-hour segment. Sometimes we feel like there's so much more that we can tackle and we can discuss. If I was able to bring forth kind of an idea, what do you think? I'm like, I'm game. I'm always game. And so it was just about 2 weeks ago that she says, I have an idea. I want you to meet Marcia Mantell. Marcia with Mantel Retirement Services, also the author of Cookin Up Your Retirement Plan.
Indeed.
And we made this, we set the date.
Yes, we did.
And so we're here now, and we're here to talk a little bit about retirement. Let's first introduce, this is your first time here. Marcia, is this your first time doing radio, or you were an old pro at this?
I'm a medium pro, Kevin. I have been here to WATD once or twice, and I did some radio earlier on in my long ago career, because I am at that age you're talking about, where it's all about retirement.
Okay, let's for folks who may or may not know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into retirement services?
Well, thanks for asking. I literally fell into it. Back in 1992, I was looking for a new job. I had a 1-year-old at home, and I needed another job. And Fidelity Investments came knocking on my door. So I got a start, and it was at the point in time back in those wee early 90s when rollover IRAs were just being really invented in a meaningful way. Because prior to 1992, most employers would just send checks when their employees left. If you had a 401k balance, they said, that's great, there's the door, here's your check. And so you would get all of your proceeds from your retirement account. And then you would turn around and spend it on something you really desperately needed, like a couch. Someone told me they bought something else equally as silly with it because we just got money in the mail. What else would you do with it? So in 1992, big legislation came in. Fidelity needed people to support this effort to help the American worker keep their retirement plan money safe and kind of, we call it in its tax-deferred status, but to keep it growing for you for retirement. And so I literally fell into the business. I was at Fidelity for 13 years, downtown Boston, and then in Smithfield, Rhode Island. And then I decided corporate America was fun, but I maybe would like to step off the gerbil wheel and see my kids from time to time. So I started my own business, and it's been 18 years of just a bigger gerbil wheel.
Okay. How did the two of you cross paths? Was it at a conference? Is it you guys kind of work in the same area? So you're like, hey.
It was I remember it as the Plymouth Chamber. I think it was a Women Mean Business lunch. They used to do these lunches. So it was a women's networking lunch, and I said, I know a lot of the people here on the South Shore. Who's this Mantel Retirement Services? So I kind of kept an eye out, and then we met in Florida. Okay. Because your wonderful husband, Bill Harris, is an RMA, a retirement management advisor, as am I. That's my retirement designation. And there was I want to say it was in
one of the Amelia Island with the
yes.
great big gingerbread house.
Yes, yes.
So we had a
Hotel.
conference right around the holidays, and there was this gigantic gingerbread house, and we literally ran into each other in the lobby.
But I think, knew we were both there because we both follow each other on Twitter, and we would tweet.
My God, the FPA meeting when we were
Yep.
tweeting back and forth. Yes.
Yep. So it's amazing how you can you kind of know someone local, follow them on social media, and then meet them in Florida. And meanwhile, we now go to lunch. And
we're fast friends.
Yeah, exactly. Fast friends. And it's been awesome. So a lot of fun. So we could talk for hours. I just know it.
Okay. Let's talk about retirement. You equate it to just like cooking. It's an art versus a science, and the ingredients matter.
They do matter. So here's my 30-year foray into the industry. I've talked to an awful lot of people over the decades. Can't even say years anymore. I talk a lot to women, and women just have a different path. Our journey is very different from a traditional, husband or man who's worked in, whether it's industry, manufacturing, been in the service, whatnot. The men have their path, and the women have a different path, which is a home path, typically, even if they work outside the home. And what I was noticing, they have no language, nothing to sort of anchor this idea of, I'm going to retire and need to pay for retirement. And we're all happy to quit our jobs. We just don't know how we're going to pay for it. So I was looking for things that worked, familiar turf, if you will. And so I started originally just with the idea of a lasagna. There's nothing like a good lasagna. And I would ask these big audiences, does anyone here know how to make a lasagna? As you can imagine, every woman's hand went up. A handful of men, they also know how to make a lasagna. And then I asked who made the best lasagna. Every hand went right back up.
Of course.
So it was getting at this idea of your individual way to make this multi-layer, whole 13 by 9 pan of deliciousness. And while we all have similar ingredients, everybody uses ricotta, right? Or everybody uses, some people use meat, some people use vegetables. You can pick their common things and unique things. But whatever you make at the end, the ingredients are important. Because, you don't want, like, say, a chicken leg in your lasagna. You need to have the right ingredients.
Unless you're at King's Richard's Fair, then it might,
then
it might
you're
be,
right.
it
You
might be
get
applicable.
That's a whole turkey leg.
A turkey leg
turkey
with
leg.
your side of lasagna.
Sure.
Exactly. But, there's things that are familiar. And it came down to, it was the kitchen. So the women and the men could all picture what their lasagna looked like. It's these layers. The order matters. Which layer do you put down first? And how do you assemble this thing? And then you have to bake it. Because just sitting there on your counter raw is not actually that delicious. Yeah, no, not going to work. So anyway, this lasagna came up as my sort of cornerstone, not to steal a name here, but as this anchor that people could understand. It's like, I have to see what my ingredients are and sort of lay them on the counter and figure out how to assemble them. Well, a Roth IRA is not the same as a traditional IRA. They're not the same. And a brokerage account is not the same as having a CD. But once you could get people familiar with the concept, then you could now start to apply our much more technical terms, and they would understand that. So that's how, the idea of the kitchen, and I firmly believe that all the best conversations for every family happen in the kitchen. And frankly, you can't get people out of your kitchen when you're having a party.
That is so true.
Isn't it? Your living room's all set up, you've got all the hors d'oeuvres way over there so you can cook. No, doesn't. Just put them on the counter. Everyone's staying in the kitchen anyway.
So how do we want to start off? So our next step here, Paula, is what?
I think one of the big questions, I think there's this race to retirement. I think it started, and Marcia's actually written a couple of other books, one on Social Security and another one for women and thinking about retirement. But this retirement, if I understand correctly, was a concept that came out of Germany. They had too many older workers, and they had younger workers coming in who couldn't get jobs. So they basically needed to incent people to leave the workforce. So that this idea came up to get people out. So it's kind of an artificial idea, but it caught on like fire. And people really, here, especially in the United States, seem to want to retire very early. And everyone's racing to this line in the sand, and it's sort of a societal thing. It's a group think thing, in my opinion, that we got to get to retirement. And 60, 65, and I'm hearing more earlier and earlier. But I think people have to step back and say, is retirement right for me? So just ponder on that question. What do you think about that, Marcia?
Yes, that is where I start in the cookbook. This cookbook is set up in 6 sections, and it's not a book you read, by the way, so it should be for everyone who no longer likes to read or just reads from tweets and Reddit and such. In this first section, it does address, do you want to retire?
It's a good question.
Yes, and how will you identify yourself? Because I had one really interesting colleague of mine said it took her 2 years to say, I'm retired. And she was not, unfortunately, it was a corporate America situation where, once you're north of 50, you are on the potential chopping block. And that's a big piece of reality we also don't talk about much in public and in polite company. But the older workers know that the door's there and their name's on it. So, she was downsized and unprepared for it because her plan was to continue to work. So it wasn't her retirement. She was retired from the company. And so it took her 2 years to wrap her arms around it. It's mostly, I find, the men really, really dislike the idea of being called a retiree. They were vice presidents and they were football stars.
They had titles, they had status.
They did have status.
They had status, they had a place.
Yes, and everyone knew it.
Right.
Right? Think of the military, all the hardware that they wear to make sure everyone knows exactly where they rank.
Once you lose that, once you are no longer, once you step down, you step aside, you just another Joe.
Guy. Yeah.
Another Joe.
And that's really hard on the ego. Really, really hard. And then on top of that, I used to get it, as much as you complained about the 500 emails that came in a day and this many phone calls, you're not getting either of them.
Any.
Yeah, so suddenly you're kind of person non grata in a way, unless you decide you're going to retire to something.
Yes.
And that's where I think Marcia's book talks about it, but that starting to think several years in advance, what's important to me? What's my life purpose? What are my values? What excites me? What gets me out of bed? What makes me want to go do something? And when you start to figure some of that, it helps create what am I going to retire to?
Yes.
To replace your time and where you spent your time.
Now, let's say if you're somebody who is not quick to adapt, I know some of the bullet points that we have here, one of them is start journaling. What if somebody they're not accustomed to jotting down, and they're like, I'm trying to keep in my head, even though they're forgetting everything. They get to that point where they barely remember the person's name down the hall that they've known for 30 years. How can your habits change so that you can start planning and thinking about, in fact, if you want to retire, how your retirement will look? So at least you have some copious notes about that. How do you change when you're not somebody who likes to change?
Yeah, I took a little different tact with the cookbook. Instead of copious notes, so people don't like to do two things. They don't like to budget, and they don't like to do copious notes. I, of course, love budgeting and copious notes, so I don't fit the mold all the time, but I greatly respect those who have a different approach. Okay. So I said, well, let's embrace it. And again, you go back to a recipe, right? You can get the cookbook out, the 9,000-page Italian cookbook with everything they've ever made in Italy. I have one of those on my shelf. I think I've made one recipe out of it. It's too big. It's too overwhelming. You look at the thing and go, oh my gosh, I don't know. 4,000 pasta recipes. I just am hungry.
I just want one.
Just one.
One.
And which one? And I have too many decisions. So I broke things into more bite-sized pieces or these ingredients or these, pick a recipe. So one of my favorite ones is actually, don't think about retirement. We ask people to think about how you're going to pay for a 30-year future span when we can't even figure out what we're going to do on the weekend.
It's true.
Really. I mean, not insulting at all. It's just we're people. Mm-hmm. So I did, one of the worksheets is, in my plans for retirement, it's just create a 1-week view. For everyone who's working, we're all on a calendar of some sort. and you've got meetings and you've got commitments and you have to be here and there and everywhere. Well, when all that goes away, to your point, Paula, you retire and then it's like you're staring at a wall. Well, let's not stare at a wall. Just 1 week. What are you going to do on Monday morning when you get up? And people look at me like, well, I don't know. It's like, exactly. We don't know unless we put something down.
Yeah.
So for me, because I really need to go to the gym and I really hate the whole idea of it, I said, fine, when I retire, I'm going to go to the gym now. I'm putting that on 8 to 9. Okay, 3 days a week. I can't possibly do 5. So, you kind of color this little box in and put gym. And then I've asked Dan, my wonderful husband of 40 years, if you can believe it, I've asked Dan to take over the cooking because I've been cooking for 40 years. He said no.
And cooking cooking doesn't just come with making the food.
No.
Because then you have to the cleanup afterwards.
There's the cleanup, but you had to prepare
and purchase it too.
Yeah, the prep, the purchasing, the cleanup. Oh my gosh! So I finally have given up, stopped fighting with him, and said, "Fine, I'll do cooking." So that's from like 4 to 7 every night. So I kind of shade those in and put with an unhappy face dinner. But then you look at the rest. Like I've got like 3 boxes, 3 hours on Monday, Wednesday, Friday for the gym, and then I've got dinner every day, and the rest is empty. It's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And you don't need to fill it all in. This does not have to look like my current schedule of, running around the country and so forth. Or Paula just got back from travels as well. It's find something to anchor. Something. Is it a class? Is it piano lessons? Is it gardening? Is it reading? I mean, I read a ton, but it's, legal books. They're not really enjoyable kind of books. So if it's just, if you want to read every night from 7 to 8 that you don't do today, pick something. And frankly, better is something new. And where I've seen this sort of split in my boomer people, my boomer friends, you're a grandparent or you're not a grandparent. When you're a grandparent, it's not actually that hard to fill this in. And it becomes more of a case of, I don't want to be the daycare provider. I only want to do, I have one friend who just does Mondays, is the nanny on Mondays. Okay, so Monday is fully booked for her. All right, she knows that. But those of us without grandkids, it becomes, I look at it as this, finally, some freedom. I can do whatever I want. I just have to figure out what that is.
Right.
And then go figure out how to make it happen. But if you're doing this 2 weeks after you've left your job, it makes it increasingly challenging because now you have all this emotion of leaving the job. You're adrift. And so this book is meant to help you, preferably 5 years before retirement. 10's ideal, but I'll settle for 2.
Yep.
And what do you think from this section of, are you finding these bits?
I think you're absolutely right. You have to start a couple of years ahead of time because do you even want to stay living in your own house? Are your children, your family, your friends in the community? I actually golfed down the Pine Hills with a group called Chicks with Sticks, and the number of women that have relocated. Maybe they relocated from another part of Massachusetts to be closer to family, coming from out of state. They came for the lifestyle, whatever. It's a big thing to think about, and you got to prepare for it.
Huge.
And one thing I think people have to be a little bit sensitive to is if they are following children, will those children stay put? So they go to be near where the grandkids and the kids are, but son-in-law
job opportunity.
Yes,
right?
A son-in-law gets reassigned, and suddenly you're in California, and the rest of the family's in Florida, and you left Massachusetts to go to the first one. Like that, you got to be really careful that you're going somewhere that you want to be. And then I also think, again, start to think about activities. I think volunteering is a wonderful way to get to meet people, learn something new, and be of service to other people. But what makes your heart sing? I've seen people picking up the day-old bread at the grocery store. They are the bus driver for the senior center. They deliver Meals on Wheels. I mean, there's so many different things. I'm in a garden club. The number of volunteer hours there is astounding for keeping the community beautiful and things. So it all is what you want to do, but you got to start thinking about it pretty early on. I think that's really key.
Now, is there a way when it comes to retirement? So let's say you lay out that this is what the next, every week is going to somewhat look like. And I love the layout of the book.
Oh, I had a
book
fabulous designer.
It's fantastic. It's color coded. It looks great. But when it comes to some people, they can quit cold turkey. They're like, you know what? That's it. I'm retiring at the end of the week. I'm done. Mm-hmm. Some would rather kind of, I'm going to go from 5 days a week to 3, and then maybe in 6 months I might go down to 1 or 2, and maybe I'll stay working part-time. Talk to us about the methodology. Should it fit each individual, and is it good to do it in phases, or to just say, that's it, I'm setting it and I'm done with it?
From my experience, it is completely individual. There are some people. I ran into one woman at a conference one time at an event, and she had a countdown to retirement clock. She knew, by golly, and I forget how many days, it was more than a year. So it was something like, 427 days and X number of hours, minutes, seconds. So she knew she was quitting cold turkey, and that was it. Great, that worked for her. That doesn't work for a lot of people. This phased retirement that you mentioned, Kevin, that's a really important concept, but it takes some bravery. So if you're working in big corporate America or anywhere really large, if you were to mention, say at 60, that you were thinking about what you want to do over the next few years, and you're thinking maybe it would be nice to go to 4 days. So now you've put all your cards on the table, which also makes you a target for a downsizing. So you really have to know your boss and the culture of the organization. If it's one that is willing, or others have been doing phased retirement and you're interested in that, by all means, bring it up. And the earlier the better to help the employer. While we're all replaceable, it's not always easy to replace somebody, and especially if you have a very specific skill. So it is highly personal. And what do you see from your clients?
I would say I've got a couple that have both requested to go 4 days in their late 50s, and it was very well received. I always say that these days, Marcia and I were talking in the hallway, there are now 5 generations of people working in the workforce. I have found that sometimes I would prefer a mature worker because they show up and they don't maybe have as many moving pieces and parts in their life that someone else. So I think a lot of employers say, great, we're going to hold on to you as long as we can because, you don't have as much movement at some of the younger generations. So I think the phased retirement can be wonderful as you figure out what you want to go to and replace those activities. So I think that's great. And then there's great, I saw my friend George Toma recently. George's family owns George Washington Toma Appliances. His dad passed away this year earlier, but he basically worked up until the end. He was there all the time. So there's something about having that purpose and routine and showing up because you're around a lot of people. So I think that can be a wonderful way to go as well. But when you've come to the point where you have made the decision that you're going to retire, ask for help.
Yes.
And Marcia, you've got a couple of resources that you sort of talk about in the book of where you might look for help. And help is across the spectrum on this.
Yes, it is. And it's interesting also with volunteering. So interesting thing about volunteering, it is not easy for, I would say, the vast majority of people to find something they love volunteering. It takes a lot. It's a lot of hit or miss because everyone says they're going to volunteer, and great, what are you going to volunteer doing? Well, if you're already involved in the Boys and Girls Club, or you're already involved in your church or your temple or something, you may, in fact, have already been at this, and now you just get to devote more time to it. But so much volunteer work is not what you think it's going to be. So one of the places I have found, there are some volunteer, if you just kind of Google around volunteering in your area, that might help you get a start. But there's also, I would say madly in love, but that's not really what I want to say. Yeah. But I'm just such a big fan of the MIT Age Lab, right here in Cambridge. MIT Age Lab, and again, it's just agelab.mit.edu, or just Google MIT Age Lab. They are doing some of the most innovative things about what it's going to be like to live in America as an older person. You know, when
Yeah.
you're not driving or you're not just running around like you always were, and when you've got some limitations, maybe, or you need help. So MIT Age Lab AARP is my other gigantic favorite. The amount of support and the things they identify to help older people. My big concern right now is the chasm that is getting so wide between the tech haves and the tech not so much haves.
Yep.
We are falling behind. And I don't mean just us boomers and Gen Xers. I even mean my kids are millennials, and they're even noticing it. It's like, oh my gosh, and they're working for big companies, and they've got everything at their fingertips. So it's a lot. So take a look, get help.
All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, more about retirement, and we'll come back, talk a little about finances and the importance of planning. You're tuned in to Monday Night Talk here on 95.9 WATD. Stay tuned.
This is Monday Night Talk with your host, Kevin Tachi, on 95.9 WATD.
I'm Peter Brown of Tiny & Sons Auto Glass in Pembroke. People ask me, is there anything they can do to prevent getting a broken windshield?
Is there anything I can do to prevent getting a broken windshield?
See? There is. Those big gravel trucks, when they're being loaded, rocks get stuck in the framework of the bed. Truck hits a bump, rock hits your windshield. It pays to stay way back.
It pays to stay way back.
However, if your windshield is broken, just call 1-888-64-TINIES. And thank you.
Fall is a great time to enjoy alfresco dining at the patio at McGuigan's. Start your open-air meal with a patio sampler platter piled high with chicken wings, cauliflower, potato skins, egg rolls, and chicken and biscuits. The patio's specialties include koji steak tips, braised short ribs, pan-seared salmon, and chicken marsala. Looking for something lighter? Sink your teeth into a patio burger, pulled pork sandwich, fish tacos, or margarita flatbread. Friday and Saturday nights feature live entertainment at the patio at McGuigan's. Sip on a specialty cocktail and unwind from the week as the fall breeze cools down the evening. The patio at McGuigan's is at 552 Washington Street in Whitman Center. And check out McGuigan's Pub next door at 546 Washington Street, also in Whitman Center.
Follow Monday Night Talk on Twitter. Start at 959WATD.com/Monday Night Talk. And don't forget to add hashtag Monday Night Talk to your tweets. And now, more Monday Night Talk with your host, Kevin Tachi.
All right, we are back with Paula Harris from Cornerstone Investments and Marcia Mantell, Mantel Retirement Services, author of Cooking Up Your Retirement Plan. We left off as Paula and Marcia were talking a little bit about how important it is to speak with a financial planner, an advisor, to sit down and talk with somebody. A lot of times we think that we can, almost like when we have something wrong with us, I got a little bit of a cough. I wonder if we try to self-remedy what the issue is and think that we have the answers, or I know, I'll YouTube it. Okay. No, what you want to do is you want to sit down with someone. You want to get let's kind of jump right back in. And I think probably the first thing that we want to do, and again, looking at the book, I will reiterate how fantastic it is, and that is that it's color coded, and there's a lot of different facts that are in it. I think one of the things that we want to make sure we do is there are essentials that we want to make sure that we list, right? How many of those essentials are there?
There are 10.
Okay.
We won't go through them all, though. 10's a lot.
Okay.
But the biggest one, and why is retirement such a topic these days? It's because we're going to live a long time.
Yeah.
This is not a promise. This is not a guarantee. But the odds of living well into your late 90s is real. And it's particularly real when you have clean water, good nutrition, lead a relatively healthy lifestyle. And the mere fact that we are pushing up on 100 for many of us means we need to figure this thing out, because we're talking about 30 years, give or take, in retirement that you have to pay for with no paycheck. So it's a tall order.
Which could be longer than some people actually worked.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And especially if you retire early and live long.
Yeah, absolutely.
As Paula knows, my father-in-law just turned 100 and my mother-in-law is 99.
Yeah.
So this is not a concept in the Mantell house.
Yeah.
I mean, we are living this and breathing this, every day. And it's very, very different. So longevity, we call the technical term, but your odds of living a long, long time in America are very great.
Yeah.
So wrap your heads around it because it's happening. But with aging, comes aches and pains and, bad knees and hardware as you replace those body parts. But everything costs a lot of money. And so I'm often one to say there's nothing affordable about healthcare in America. It's awesome. We have no shortage of great opportunities and options, but it is expensive. Put your numbers together. Don't guess at this stuff. So that's a big piece of the planning. One of the key ingredients is healthcare expenses. Other things that we just need to move toward and embrace, things that we don't want. We'd rather just put our heads in the sand, right? But like living alone. Like I said, I've been married a long time. Gosh, if Dan's not here anymore, who am I going to boss around?
Yeah.
I mean, how is that going to work when I'm old and I don't want to go get my own Chinese food?
Well, and I just came back because we sponsored the Modern Widows Club Widow Empowerment event in St. Louis. So I was there with about almost 200 widows from all ages. One widow I met, she was widowed at 21.
Oh.
And she lost her 15-month-old son at the time, too. I mean, horrible.
Oh,
and then
my
women
gosh.
that are much older, but they, a lot of these women, the average age is 59.
Yeah.
People don't remember. And at Modern Widows, it's 56. I met so many young people, and they weren't prepared at all.
No.
Absolutely not prepared. And so the emotion with all that is huge, but we're going to live alone, especially women are going to live alone.
Especially women.
So that's a big deal. And you're right. How do you put that support system in place now?
Now. Yeah, you can't wait until you're in crisis.
Right.
On a happier note, though, there's debt. We need to manage our debt because that's really, it's fascinating to see both before COVID, and then during COVID, and now after COVID. What we're seeing is just that more and more and more older people are carrying more and more and more debt, but they don't have a job.
Yeah.
So I really worry about that. That's a trend I'd like to see go away. And I mean, we're talking about credit card debt, just credit card debt. Forget your mortgage and your car, but credit cards about $8,200 for the group, the 55 to 64-year-olds. So just prior to retirement. It is dangerous to carry that much debt, and you need a good credit score even when you're older, or they're using them to get into continuous care facilities or nursing homes, or so you got to keep up your credit score. So those are some of the key ingredients.
And I think the other ingredient is right now we're facing inflation.
Yeah.
And that is probably...
These are things that you have to factor in.
Yeah, you have to factor in, especially in retirement. You can't just make things up. You can't just earn more, potentially. So inflation is a silent...
That's what I call it, too.
Yeah.
The silent risk.
But it's very, very real. And then you have here taxes. I think that's another one that's a big deal. Taxes are going to be a big deal, and estate taxes are a big deal. We've just had to pay a really big check to Massachusetts for my in-laws who passed away a week apart last year. Yeah. That is a big surprise. So you want to make sure you have your estate plan in place. And I met a woman this weekend. She and her husband are married 18 years. She said, thankfully, we talked to a financial advisor the year before he died. It was unexpected that he died, because we didn't even have beneficiaries named. And he died without a will, and his siblings and nieces and nephews thought they were entitled to his money because the father had given him an inheritance 10 years before. So suddenly, if you don't have those things in writing, everybody is an heir. So that's a big, big deal. So I think you're right. Getting some of these 10 ingredients and sort of taken care of, I think it is.
And they take a long time to do.
Right.
I also talk about this is not a DIY weekend. You're not putting a gazebo up in the backyard.
Sure.
From Home Depot. I mean, this stuff, it's hard. It takes a long time, and you get frustrated because the laws are very complex that you're working with, and needing that expert help is a must.
Yeah.
But also knowing, you probably want to be mindful of debt. I think that's key. I know with myself and my significant other, we're being mindful as to paying down our mortgage.
Yes.
We want to make sure that we, whatever costs we have are minimal. They're always going to be going up, but it's something that is in the back of our minds.
Because those that you control,
Yes.
and you're doing it so far ahead, you can't decide in a year. Well, unless you're super wealthy, we're gonna pay off our 15 years left on the mortgage.
Yep.
It takes 15 years, so you have to just be thinking a little more long term from a much earlier age.
And one thing I also will say to people who are feeling that financial squeeze quite a bit, especially if they live up here in the Northeast, you really might consider relocating. There are other parts of the U.S. where the cost of living is much less expensive. And it's something that you really have to factor in, because if it's going to be razor thin for you, it's just going to get harder. So I think people need to look at that. Do I move south?
Yeah, and especially if you're a renter.
Yes.
There's no guarantee with a house either, but at least if the mortgage is paid off, that debt has been serviced. But when you rent, as do something like about 35 to 40% of the American population, your rent is a free-for-all.
Yep.
Especially in this last era, this inflation era we've been in.
Now, I know that we're sitting here as we're kind of older, and we're closer to that goal than some others, but I'm sure there's some in the listening audience who might be younger, and maybe they might be in their 20s, maybe they might be in their 30s. What should they be thinking about? Maybe they're in their early 40s. What should they be thinking about? What should they be doing before they get to an age where they're like, oh, I should have?
Yeah, the most important thing, I think, is, again, put things on paper. I know there are a million apps out there, but when you see how much you're spending, where your money's going, and you don't have to keep it up, but just do it one time, so that you, especially if you're working with someone, if you have a spouse or a partner, the two of you need to be on the same page, because where you're moving with this is increase your savings into your retirement plan at work if you have one. If you don't have one, you need to fund an IRA.
Yep.
And to get ahead of that vicious cycle, and to be able to take advantage of compounding interest. So put your money to work for you, even if you don't have a lot. I mean, if you're 23 years old making $40,000, you're thinking, hey, Marsh, I don't have a whole lot of money. What are you talking about? But, 2%, 3% of your salary that you put away, you can readjust your living expenses to get rid of that 2 or 3% and put it into your retirement account. Your very, very best decade to save for retirement is your 20s.
Yep.
And we never tell the 20-somethings that.
And I think the other thing is make sure you're getting the company match. If there's a company match, you got to be participating. Like I always say, if you saw a $100 bill on the ground, would you step over it? But that's what people are doing when they don't participate in a retirement plan, especially when it has a match.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
If there's the Roth option, you definitely put money in the Roth option of your retirement plan, because it's going to grow tax-free, is going to come out tax-free. And having tax-free money in retirement is awesome.
People are so excited when they realize that they've been saving in the Roth. They're like, oh, I don't have to pay tax on that in retirement?
Yep.
Yeah, because you already paid tax on it up front. It's not that you didn't pay tax, it's that you pay it up front.
Yep.
So here's my question, though, is there a guarantee to that, though? I mean, I know that taxes can increase and rise. I mean, is it as you are saving, that increase is built in to your Roth IRA? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
No, not necessarily. I think basically the Roth IRA is going to be invested, and it's always going to be tax-free. So unless, people often ask me it this way, could the government change that rule?
Yeah, that's what I thought you were going to ask also.
Yeah, me too. Yes, they could, but I think
they won't.
Yeah, I don't think they would either. They would never get reelected if they actually went about and did something like this. And remember, they are in these same plans too. They don't want to hurt themselves, their family, their constituents. So the chances of that happening are not true. But you can any investment, you can lose money.
Yeah.
So you don't want to do crazy, risky things by any means. As I always say to people, I had a woman who's a receptionist at a medical facility the other day call me and said, Should I invest in this pre-IPO that this guy told me about? I already got burnt on doing Bitcoin. I was like, no, do not invest in this. So you do have to be cautious in where you invest. That's a very important thing.
And again, we are so sophisticated across the globe, really, with investments. And there are thousands of investments and types of investments, and we call them vehicles, and their tax status and their rules are all different. I mean, unless you want to do this on your own, and this is what you spend 4 or 5 hours a day playing with, you need the expertise of investment people, and especially in your 20s. You can, I know it's hard, people say, yeah, but I don't have enough money, I can't find an advisor. Well, that is partially true. You can't find necessarily, I mean, everyone needs to bring their expertise to the table, and financial advisors need to get paid. But there are enormous organizations out there with 1-800 numbers, and pick one. Pick Fidelity, pick Vanguard, pick Schwab, pick Bank of America.
Yeah, don't jump around.
Yeah,
right.
You pick one, because they're all tremendous at the depth of educational information they now have available to you for free.
Yep.
So start there, and then when you amass some money, then you pay your financial advisor.
That is the voice of Marcia Mantell, Mantel Retirement Services, author of Cooking Up Your Retirement Plan, along with Paula Harris, WH Cornerstone Investment, talking about retirement. We're trying to be mindful of different demographics here. So if it seems as though we're kind of jumping around, we're trying to help as many as possible. Hopefully we're catching those 20 or 30 somethings who, are looking to be smart and wise when it comes to investing. Let's talk about certain milestones. Let's talk about birthdays, and especially whether you're by yourself or you have a spouse. How are these key ingredients to our retirement?
Now, Marcia, you've got great work pages in here that I love. So go through those.
Okay, sure. It's interesting. Women especially never want to admit their age. I don't know what that's about. By golly, I'm 62 and I feel it every single day. I am more than happy to have those years in my rearview mirror. But our industry wants to dance around ages so that we don't offend anybody. But let me tell you this. All the laws that affect retirement have an age attached to them. So, for example, age 50, the year you turn 50, you get to save more in your retirement plan at work, your 401k, 403b, and IRAs. Well, you can't do it at 49 or 30. But you get to do it at 50. So 50, first milestone.
Your catch-up contribution.
Your catch-up contributions, exactly. Age 55, you get to do catch-up contributions on health savings accounts, which are also now critical to retirement planning. 59 and a half, I know it's a goofball age, but at 59 and a half, you can now, if you retire early or if you need some money, you can take money out of an IRA without a 10% early withdrawal penalty, a tax penalty. And then there are tons of ages in your 60s. 62 is the one you were talking about, Social Security earlier. These early people want to retire earlier and earlier. 62 is the one most people want to aim for. It's like, oh my gosh, I hope I can make it till 62 because Social Security is available. And sometimes, but my hair's on fire when I hear that because you lock in the least amount of an already small benefit. And so somehow in America, we have not kept up with the purpose of Social Security. It is to barely keep you out of poverty. It does a very fine job of that, but it does not replace your paycheck.
People don't realize that.
No, they
don't realize it. It's not supposed an all be all. It's supposed to be something that, it's part of the solution, not the
solution.
Here's where I go from lasagna to layer cake because I love a cake. You know how you make layer cakes and there's a bottom layer?
There is.
And that's Social Security. It's the one that's stuck to the cake. You put a little blob of frosting on there and anchor it down. That's the start of your retirement income. And then there'll be another layer of maybe pension money and another layer of annuity money and then some investments and then some tax deferreds and then Roth is at the top, which I love Roth IRAs too. So we have to understand what it's for and then don't claim it too early.
Yep.
It's 33% of Americans claim at 62.
And what are they leaving on the table? If
30% of their money.
Yep.
That's just not a good formula.
And Marcia, I heard it said this way one day. Your 62-year-old self is making a decision for your 95-year-old self.
Yes, that's so true.
You're looking with such a short lens over a long period of time, and that is not going to increase much. So
no, it's
to
not.
wait.
And there's no one in their 70s and 80s and 90s who thinks that's a good idea. So where's the big implication, though, for spouses? It's when the higher earner spouse decides to claim early. So not only then does household income get impacted while you're both alive, but when the first person dies, the surviving spouse is left with a whole lot less than they should have had. All because it's my money. I can take it. Yeah, all right, but don't. Wait till 70, a better age.
So I think, Marcia, you just went through that layer cake.
Yeah.
Of those different savings vehicles. Let's talk about replacing the I would call it the big paycheck with now a bunch of little paychecks.
Yes.
So reverse that discussion a little bit.
Sure. So, it's great when you work for an employer and you get a check once a week, once a month, whatever. And all the taxes are taken out, your FICA is paid into Social Security and Medicare, and you just get a lump sum. You get a number. And you spend it. Great. Now in retirement, there is no paycheck. So now you have to critically and importantly orchestrate which spigots to turn on. Now we're cleaning the kitchen.
Okay.
So we're turning on different spigots at different times. 62, as I mentioned, the earliest for Social Security, but don't do it. 66 to 67 is when you get your optimal amount. So maybe you turn that spigot on. And then at 73 or 75, required minimum distributions come into play. So now you have to start taking money out of your IRAs, your 401ks, your 403bs, and that generates a certain amount of income. If you had an annuity in place, it generates a certain calculated value of an income. So you've got to piece together 5, 6, 7, 8 little bits, little faucets. I think of those big, long kind of wash tubs with lots of faucets on them. And mine turn on later than Dan's because he's older. So the older spouse, their spigots turn on first. You turn them on a little bit, and then they're all full on when the youngest spouse is 75 or 73. So it's really an orchestration of which ingredients do you layer in that lasagna pan first and how much.
I think that's hard for people to understand. I think that's where
Very hard.
You can really benefit from getting some guidance and help.
And being patient.
Yes, being patient.
Being patient is key. And we as Americans
we're not.
struggle with being patient and waiting and thinking that there's going to be some kind of a golden windfall somewhere.
Right.
And it's the windfall that never comes.
Yep.
We got a few minutes left here with Marcia and Paula. Let's talk budgets. And is it too soon to be someone who budgets and you have a tight budget, something that might be in between what you regularly would budget and what your budget would be if your retirement?
That's interesting. Yeah, budgets are super important, and there are a lot of ways to do them. When you're young, so if you start out in your 20s and you're quite literally putting the nickels together to make sure you can meet rent, I don't know whose story that is, Dan Mantell. When you start out with really so little that you don't know if you're going to be able to buy groceries and pay the rent, you never forget that. And so you are very mindful with your pennies, and you watch where they go. And you can be a little looser with that as you earn more money and have more. But most of us start out very modestly, and we build the budget. So the important things first, you need to pay for a roof over your head, your insurance, so protect what you do have, and food. You then have to figure out transportation. All of that happens. As you move into retirement, virtually everything stays the same. And whatever you're spending, the last day before you retire, with the exception of your mortgage, if you really are going to have that paid off. But what you're doing at, let's say, 66 and 11 months, and you're retiring at 67, nothing has changed except your paycheck went away.
Right.
Yep.
But your expenses all stay the same.
Right.
Your cell phone bill is what it is, and your grocery bill is what it is. You're eating out more. You're on vacation. You spend more.
So you tend to people often do spend more, and that's not they don't think they will, because society said we usually will spend 80% less.
Downsize,
It doesn't usually happen, and people are not downsizing houses because the house they have is nicer than what they could downsize to these days. So they're going to keep it. So they're going to keep the 5-bedroom house often. Because the kids might come home and they're going to carry all that cost.
Grandkids, stuff like
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
We got about 5 minutes left, less than that, actually. And I think what we want to finish up with is planning, because these might be things that folks don't necessarily think top of mind. Estate planning, legacy. And I know it's we all want to live forever, but we should also be planning for end of life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And making your own decisions. This is what I'm really big on. We're all grown-ups here.
Yep.
And all the people we work with are grown-ups.
Yep.
And the kicking and screaming that I don't want to decide just is enough to
Doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
Why would you put this burden on your children or your spouse or any of your other loved ones? Do your estate plan. These are the legal documents, your will and your healthcare proxies and all of that. It's incredibly important to do this. If you don't have the money for an attorney, guess what? Google it. Go find the forms. At least get something written down. Legacy, though, these are your family values. This is, who are you? Who is your family? Where did you come from? Who is going to take care of your 99,000 photos on your phone? And your grandma's wedding dress and the Christmas ornaments and all of that. It needs to go to someone. Otherwise, the kids chuck it all in the dumpster. So, plan for that. And end of life, there are some wonderful organizations out there that help us think through end of life, whether we're ill or not ill. We get one turn around the merry-go-round, and we want it to be great, but we have to plan for the day we come off that merry-go-round. And it's not easy for people to do this. Well, would it be easy for your kids?
No.
Right.
So
No, it's just one more
own
thing.
up.
You don't want to burden
That's
your
right.
children or
Yeah,
your grandchildren.
Exactly.
And that's
And
what
you
I hear.
see the other end.
When you work with widows, and most people come to me when they say, I don't want to be a burden to my family. And that's why that discussions around end of life and all of this planning is just so key. And Marcia, you have such great workbooks and worksheets in the workbook to help people with all this. I mean, this is a fun document to work with. It's really well done. And you can even color in it, which is cool.
But it also, it really explains, and there's some things that are sobering in here as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very sobering. You want to keep in mind, you're 65, what's the chances of you living to 85 years old?
Yep.
Your spouse, she might live till 87, 87. There's a 50% chance. You, a little less if you're male.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's the way life works.
Well, it is, but I don't believe in, skipping ingredients.
No.
You skip the sausage, and that is just not my signature lasagna.
No.
What happened here?
Not going to happen.
No. So the ingredients are all here, but it is, I appreciate your comments, Paula, that it's meant to be way more fun than we usually have in financial services.
And I think one of the other nice things you said is this is a great thing to do on your own. Get your foundation, and then you may approach an advisor because you've done your thinking.
Absolutely.
And I think the conversations between spouses is critical because we just spend so much time in our own lanes often, and coming together, whether you grab a bottle of wine and a lasagna and have the talk.
The talk.
It's one time, and I know we're getting short on time, but Marcia does these family discussions with her daughters every year, family discussions. It's just awesome. So she walks the talk. It's terrific.
Marcia, if folks want to find out more about you, they want to talk with you about retirement services, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, best place is my blog, actually, because I'm a big Boomer fan. So it's called boomerretirementbriefs.com. And you can check out what the Boomers are doing, how we're reinventing retirement, and reach me on email from boomerretirementbriefs.com.
And if folks want to find out more about their financial house, they want to talk about investing, how can they find out more, whether to talk with you, you and Bill?
Yes. WHcornerstone.com, and on social media, using WH Cornerstone as well. So love to share information and love to help people.
While we still have 90 seconds, anything that we didn't take a moment to talk about, but you want to at least share?
Yes.
Marcia.
Yes. Do this at your kitchen table. This planning, this talking. Yes, talk to your spouse. Oh, for heaven's sake, talk to your spouse. Pretend you love them still. The conversations went surprisingly smoothly. I tested this on Dan as well as with clients. And Dan and I scheduled 45 minutes, and we spent 4 hours. It is amazing what we ended up talking about. It goes all over when you just have a little bit of a framework instead of this, let's plan for retirement, and you have no idea where to start. So talk.
And I think a lot of this too is it's just a time to dream. So this doesn't have to be heavy. This is you're planning out your future. This is exciting.
Yeah.
So make it that way. Go into it with like, oh my gosh, I want to see what the possibilities are. Throw lots of spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks.
Exactly.
You know, and then have that sweet cannoli at the end to like treat yourself because you did it. You sat down and did it.
Yeah.
Paula, Marcia, thank you so much for your time. Thank our listeners for tuning into this great segment. You've been tuned in to Monday Night Talk here on 95.9 WATD. Until next week at 6:15 p.m. Have a great evening.
WATD FM Marshfield, WBMS Brockton.